This is a presentation that translates the attaché de systématique littérature review into a conference-ready narrative. The core argument is that RPA has become a credible enabler of internal audit modernization, especially for repetitive and rules-based procedures. However, the literature shows that efficiency benefits are clearer and more immediate than effectiveness benefits. The presentation therefore separates these two outcomes and emphasizes governance, data readiness, and human judgment as the conditions that determine whether automation strengthens assurance quality. I begin by setting out the roadmap. First, I explain the pressures that make automation attractive. Second, I summarize the review, design, and the research questions. Third, I show how the final corpus was constructed. Fourth, I synthesize the evidence on efficiency, effectiveness, and governance. Finally, I move from synthesis to contribution by presenting the conceptual framework, testable propositions, and practical guidance for chief audit executives, audit committees, and management. The review starts from a practical reality. Internal audit functions face greater expectations for speed, coverage, and insight, yet they continue to operate under budget and talent constraints. In this environment, RPA appears attractive because it automates. The literature consistently presents bots as useful for evidence extraction, reconciliations, and standard control tests. But the deeper scholarly question is not simply whether RPA saves time. Those time savings translate into better assurance outcomes. The specific problem addressed by the paper is conceptual and empirical. The literature often treats audit modernization as if faster execution automatically means better assurance. This is not analytically precise. Efficiency concerns the resources used to produce audit outputs, while effectiveness concerns whether audit objectives are actually achieved. By disentangling these constructs, the review clarifies what the evidence really shows and where the literature still lacks robust internal audit-specific findings. The importance of the review is multi-layered. Academically, it consolidates a fragmented literature and brings conceptual discipline to the distinction between efficiency and effectiveness. Professionally, it gives audit leaders a sharper way to evaluate automation programs. From a governance perspective, it treats bot controls as central rather than secondary. And from an ACE perspective, it develops a theory-informed agenda that can support future empirical work on RPA-enabled internal audit. The paper has a single overarching aim: to understand how RPA affects internal audit performance and to convert that understanding into an ACE-aligned agenda. The objectives reflect that logic. First, the authors verify the literature corpus. Second, code outcomes explicitly rather than relying on vague claims of improvement. Third, they identify adoption and governance conditions. Fourth, they formulate a conceptual model and propositions that can be tested in future internal audit settings. These 6 questions organize the review. Together, they move from operational concerns, such as which tasks are automated, to performance concerns, such as how efficiency and effectiveness are measured, and finally to governance and theory concerns. This structure is because it prevents the analysis from remaining merely descriptive. Instead, it produces a layered account of what is automated, what outcomes are reported, what risks emerge, and what still needs to be studied. This slide introduces the central analytical distinction of the paper. Efficiency refers to doing audit work faster or with fewer resources. Effectiveness refers to the quality and assurance value of the audit. The review shows stronger evidence for the first than for the second. The key linking mechanism is reallocation. Automation creates value when time saved on routine work is redirected toward higher judgment procedures such as exception analysis, risk assessment, and interpretation. Rather than using a single theory, the paper integrates several AAS perspectives. RBV and dynamic capabilities explain RPA as a capability that can be built and reconfigured. TAM and Utah explain whether auditors actually adopt and continue to use the technology. Metawee captures organizational readiness and implementation context. Task technology fit is especially important because it explains why bots excel in structured activities but struggle when professional judgment is central. Methodologically, the study follows Prisma 2020 logic for a systematic literature review. The authors define eligibility criteria in advance, search two major discovery sources, screen titles and abstracts, evaluate full text, and then code the final studies using explicit categories. This is important because it transforms a broad and potentially diffuse technology literature into a transparent and replicable review process. The Prisma flow shows the logic of narrowing the evidence base. 76 records were initially identified across the two main search channels. After duplicate removal and screening, only 20 studies met the inclusion criteria. This is significant because it shows that truly internal, audit-relevant, peer-reviewed RPA evidence is still a relatively focused body of literature. The smaller final corpus also reinforces the paper's claim that IA-specific empirical evidence remains limited. This slide characterizes the final corpus. The most visible feature is methodological imbalance. The literature contains many frameworks and conceptual pieces, but fewer studies that directly measure internal audit outcomes in real-field settings. The year edition also suggests growing interest over time, especially from 2022 onward, which is consistent with the broader digital transformation of audit and assurance. The descriptive overview supports one of the paper's main claims. The field is conceptually mature enough to specify where RPA fits and what controls it requires, but not yet empirically mature enough to claim universal effectiveness gains. The literature therefore provides guidance on audit task design and operating models, while leaving open important questions about consistent improvements in audit quality and assurance outcomes. A major contribution of the review is operational clarity. Instead of treating automation outcomes as a single construct, the authors define efficiency, effectiveness, and the mechanisms that connect them. This coding structure allows the literature to be interpreted more precisely. It also helps practitioners design separate KPIs, for example, one set for cycle time reduction and another for evidence reliability or anomaly detection quality. This evidence map provides a visual summary rather than a statistical meta-analysis. The pattern is clear. More studies provide support for efficiency-oriented outcomes than for direct improvements in effectiveness. Governance and adoption studies often sit in the middle because they explain enabling conditions rather than reporting direct performance outcomes. This reinforces the review's conclusion that stronger governance is necessary if efficiency gains are to translate into effectiveness gains. This conceptual framework condenses the review's logic. RPA capability alone is not enough. Performance depends on task fit, adoption mechanisms, and especially governance controls. Governance is treated as both an enabler and a safeguard because it determines whether automated work remains controllable, explainable, and auditable. The final outcome is therefore dual. Efficiency may rise quickly, but effectiveness depends on the interaction of all these elements. The review offers concrete guidance for practice. Chief audit executives should not automate everything at once. They should start with stable, repetitive procedures and track different KPIs for efficiency and effectiveness. Audit committees should insist on governance evidence, not only productivity claims. Management functions such as CIO and CFO offices should treat bots as part of the control environment, subject to coordinated identity, access, and change control disciplines. The future research agenda is intentionally concrete. The literature needs more field-based evidence, especially on whether RPA-driven continuous control testing improves audit quality. Governance design is another major, including bot identities and segregation of duties. A third gap concerns people, reskilling, work redesign, and behavioral adaptation. Finally, future studies should explore how RPA works alongside analytics and AI rather than in isolation. The discussion condenses the overall message of the review. On the left side are claims the literature supports with relative confidence. RPA is useful for repetitive audit work, and efficiency gains are real. On the right side are ethical questions, effectiveness, judgment, governance failure, and the need for better internal audit-specific evidence. This asymmetry is not a weakness of the review. It is one of its most important findings. In conclusion, the review positions RPA as an important enabler of internal audit modernization, but under specific conditions. The strongest and most defensible benefits are efficiency-oriented. Effectiveness gains are possible, but they are not automatic and depend on fit, governance, and retained professional judgment. The most sustainable model is therefore complementary rather than substitutional. Bots handle structured execution, while auditors focus on interpretation, skepticism, and assurance value. Thank you. I welcome questions on the review design, the distinction between efficiency and effectiveness, the conceptual framework, and the governance implications for internal audit automation.